Well, thank you very much for such a warm regard, Professor BUTEL. It's such a pleasure and honor to be invited at Franco-Japan Center, that's the name, in Tsukai-kan. And my name is MIURA. I'm teaching political science at Sophia University. And my major is gender politics and warfare politics, Japanese politics, and so on. So today I'd like to talk about recent policy development regarding women and also gender equality or gender inequality, to be more precise. Probably you know that current Prime Minister Abe is strongly advocating for women mix or women's empowerment. So I'm going to start with what he's trying to do under a current situation. If you know a Japanese word, the buzzword these days is 女性の活躍. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are very good at English. So they translated this language into English by using women's empowerment. The first, when I hear the word empowerment, it sounds like women really get power, right? That's the meaning of empowerment. But 女性の活躍 is slightly very much different from what you hear from the term women's empowerment. Originally, the government used the term 女性の活用 utilization women's power. That's more direct. You can get the sense. The government need to use women's power, utilize women's power for economic purposes. But it sounds very bad. So the government decided to change the term from women's utilization of women's power to women's empowerment. So this is the current term that the government and society use to promote women's status and women's their status in society. And this is 2 years ago, Prime Minister Abe clearly stated his position. He said, women's empowerment is often discussed in the context of social policy, but I'm different. It should be placed at the core of at the core of growth strategy. So he doesn't hide his intention. This is about economic policy. It is about economic growth. It's not about human rights. It's not about gender equality. It's not about social policy. So that's really the essence of women's empowerment policy in Japan. And to substantiate his policy commitment, he actually nominated 5 women last year. Almost last year. You probably remember that 5 women nominated as ministers. Unfortunately, 2 women had to step down because of financial scandals, right? Almost 2 months after the appointment. And now we have only 3 women. But still, he committed to nominate women as much as possible. And also, the government and the Diet passed the Women's Empowerment Law, which I'm going to talk about later, and which also encourage corporate managers to hire more women and put women in higher positions. So that's sort of the core policies that Prime Minister Abe's cabinet tried to focus these days. But women in Japan are very much ambivalent about this so-called women's empowerment policy because we know the intention. And this is a blog that the government created almost 2 years ago. The term government uses is to create a society in which women shine. So women need to shine. The Japanese women need to shine. And then this is an official blog created by the government. And then it said, the first page was nice picture of Prime Minister with nice smile, with shining smile, and it says shine. But it put the shine in the capital letters. So if you read Japanese, you read as shine. So that was very shocking to us, like, oh my God, our Prime Minister is telling us to die. Not shine, but die. And we really get the message right. Okay, that's the meaning. By the way, this blog is really kind of strange blog, and then it's also shocking that the government uses this blog, Amiburo, and there are lots of, if you're working for companies, some companies not allow their employees to access to this blog. So this is that kind of blog. So it is another shocking news that the government chose this blog to put their own messages. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about so why the government is giving us that kind of message, where Japan is going. And I call the current policy tendency neoliberal motherhood. It's a combination of neoliberal policy and also maternalism. So there's two components in it. And that is why the women's policy in Japan are so contradictory with each other. Even though government is quite committed to promoting women's status, all the result is very much mixed. So I'm telling you why that's the case. And so today's talk is about neoliberal motherhood and the, sort of the details of what is a neoliberal policy and also what sort of maternalism has been taken. And I call a Japanese type of maternalism a statist family ideology. It's very much ideological. It's a family ideology, but it's also statist. The combination of statist and the family ideology is the basic characteristics of the Japanese family policy and also maternalism. So let me go through the trilemma of the care economy. So in order to understand Japanese government's commitment to women's empowerment policy, we need to know what is the context under which government is so keen on the issue of women. And there are basically three motives, three goals the government wants to achieve. And first of all, it is about economic growth, as I said. So in order to promote women's status, the goal is to generate economic growth. And the context is that the population is very much shrinking and very rapidly. The peak of 18 years old population was 1992. If you compare the population of 1992 and current population of 18 years old, there is about 40% reduction. So you can see how quickly the population is aging and also declining. And in order to keep the Japanese economic status, you need to have a certain number of populations. So because of that, the Japanese government is very much keen on the issue of shrinking labor forces and a shrinking population. And also, you probably know that the Japanese government is not so open to immigrations and foreign laborers. So the solution is to encourage women to stay in the labor market. So that's really the priority behind women's empowerment policy. To generate economic growth, in order to do that, the government needs to encourage women to stay in the labor market. And also, the Wenomics is another buzzword the government likes to use. Kashi Matsui, working for Goldman Sachs, created this term, and she sort of calculated that if Japanese companies keep using women more, she calculated that, Japanese economy can generate a certain amount of growth. And the reason is that not just about labor force per se, but because Japanese economy needs more dynamic, ideas and also product development, and also Japanese economy needs to create larger market. In order to do that, the women's might be able to bring new product ideas appealing to women's and mothers. And mothers having more financial resources, they might be able to buy more stuff appealing to them. So because of that, to create a new market for women and mothers, that's another reason behind that, and the women's are encouraged to stay in the labor market. And the second purpose is to boost the birth rate. The current birth rate is about 1.4, which is not bad. I mean, getting, better and better, but the lowest point was 1.2, I think. So government is very much worried about declining our population. So government needs to encourage women to bear more babies. I'm going to talk about, there are many ways to encourage women to have more babies, but government basically don't want to spend that much money. So government want to encourage sort of morally. So I'm going to talk about that later. But that's the second reason that government needs more women. And the third is to constrain the social expenditures. As you know, that Japan has a huge debt. Almost Japanese debt, accumulated debt, is about 140% of GDP, I suppose. Anyway, that's the largest debt among OECD countries. So Japanese government doesn't have much money to spend on new items. And family policy is very much new items. And the government knows that they have to spend money to encourage women to have more babies, but they don't have money. So the solution is marketization and also moral support. So that's third constraint or third goal is they want to constrain social expenditure. So they want to rely on women's power in terms of care providers. Because Japanese women tend to be primary care providers. That means that women provided care for free. And that's very cheap for welfare states. And the government doesn't want to spend in that regard. So I call that, this is like a trilemma of the care economy. So most of government in affluent democracy want to achieve these three goals: to generate economic growth, to boost the birth rates, and also constrain social expenditures. These goals are very much common among the governments in affluent democracies. But this is a trilemma. You can get basically 2 out of 3. You can have the 3 at the same time. You can get the 2. So if you want to generate economic growth and want babies, you have to spend money, basically. You have to spend money and create nurseries and preschools so that women can keep working after having babies. So that's sort of a Nordish or Scandinavian model. So you have a big welfare state, but you can achieve that. You can achieve 3 things together. But Japanese government doesn't want to spend money, so that's why this is really trilemma, and it was really very much trapped. Even though they wanted to achieve 3 goals at the same time, they can't really do it. So that's why that even though the government seriously committed to gender equality, there is always hurdles that there is always we don't see any kind of breakthrough phenomena in Japan. Okay, so why is that so difficult to achieve gender equality in Japan? So that's the next question. And if you look at 1970s in affluent democracy, most of countries had the same model. Like it's basically a single breadwinner model. So men worked and become a primary wage earners, and the women are primary care providers. That combination is very much common, almost universal among affluent democracies. And the difference is that Japan still keeps the same model. Japan has not changed. But other countries in Western Europe or United States and North America, they have changed their tax system or welfare system and also labor market system to accommodate the dual earner models. But Japan has not changed yet. And why is that difficult? And of course, there might be some ideological issue or social norms, but also another reason is that Japanese way of labor market is very much difficult to change, or it's very much difficult to incorporate gender equality. I call the labor markets as gendered dual system. Labor market is structured by laws and practices, so all the labor markets structure in particular way. So Japanese way of labor market structure is very much dualized and also genderized. So that is why it's so difficult to achieve gender equality. So if you want to have gender equality, you have to basically overhaul everything. You have to completely reform the Japanese labor market. It's like a revolution. It's almost impossible to do that. So you have to change little by little. So in that case, gender equality is sort of like a stumbling block, and gender equality cannot be achieved because of this kind of piecemeal reforms. So I tell you the characteristics of the gender dual system. So one thing is that this is a basically male breadwinner model, which used to be common around the world. But the difference is that there is a very much a dual structure between insiders and outsiders. So insiders enjoy full membership, and this is not just about lifetime employment or regular workers and non-regular workers, but this is about membership. This is about status and also membership. So insiders can enjoy full membership. That means that they have lifetime employment. Although it is lifetime, it's called lifetime employment, but there is a mandatory retirement in Japan. So it used to be 55, it's went up to 60, and now it's moving up to 65, but there is a mandatory retirement. So lifetime employment up to the mandatory retirement. So that's the meaning of lifetime employment. And also insiders have full benefits and a full coverage, and also I have to say it is merit-based wages. So people call Japanese wages like a seniority-based wages. There is some misunderstanding. This is merit-based, but merit and seniority are overlap to a degree that we call it the seniority wages. I tell you the graph later. So this is a very much merit-based system. But the thing is that how companies evaluate your merits. And they evaluate your merits based on your commitment to the company, your loyalty to the company. So that means that you have to accept all kinds of orders coming from the companies, especially working long hours and also relocations. These two things are very important. These two things shows the degree of your commitment, your loyalty to the companies. That affects your merit by the company. So, for example, if you reject relocation because you have to take care of your parents, and the company fire you, is that constitutional or is that legal or not? And the Japanese court rule that that's legal. So, company can officially and legally fire employees who rejected the order of relocation, based on their duty to take care of their elderly parents. So that means that you have to basically sacrifice your own private life to show your commitment and loyalty to the company. So that's the condition to become a full member. And so outsiders, if you cannot commit that much, if you cannot sacrifice your personal life, you have to become outsiders. And outsiders cannot enjoy that kind of full benefit or full membership. And that means that you have to accept unstable employment. Usually contract is very short. And if you become a non-regular worker, contract can be 3 months, sometimes just 1 month and renewed. But it's very short and you always have to worry that your contract might not be renewed. So employment is very much stable. And the wage is very low, and the wage is based on your job that you perform. Unlike insiders, your wage and your jobs are not matched because companies decide your wages based on the condition that you work lifetime. So eventually your job and your contribution, also your wages will match at the end of retirement age, but it doesn't match if you look at the certain time period. But for non-regular workers, outsiders, your job and your wages are very much matched. So it's a job-based wages, and most of the non-regular workers is paid slightly up around basically the minimum wages. And the Japanese minimum wages are very low internationally. So that means that you have to suffer from low wages. And of course, no benefit, no coverage. So there's a huge gap between outsiders and insiders. And the thing is, most of women are trapped into outsiders. And back in 1970s and 1980s, that was fine in the sense that most of men were able to have the status of insiders. And most of women are housewives, and they take up part-time jobs as a supplementary to their household incomes. But the situation has changed, and also gender norms has changed. So this kind of insider-outsider gap based on gender division of labor is not really, it's creating a new problem. In order to gender equality, you have to really break out this gap between insider and outsiders, but it's so difficult to change it. That's the reason that we have difficulty to achieve gender equality in Japan. And what the government has done is that it basically extend this kind of genderized system, not really achieving gender equality. And we see a huge expansion of non-regular workers in the past 20 years. I show you the graph. And as of 2002, if you see the graph, if you look at the women, regular and non-regular workers, as of 2002, we see more women taking up non-regular job than regular jobs. So over the half of women actually have non-regular jobs these days. But by the way, if you look at the young graduates of high school and also universities, 35% of men have non-regular job, and over 50% of women have just non-regular job, and it's extremely difficult to switch from no-regular job to a regular job in Japan. So if your first-time job after graduation is no regular job, you can imagine that how grim their future can be. And this is the reality of the Japanese labor market these days. And also you can see the graph, and the Japanese term of non-regular workers are very much genderized. A part-time worker is not part-time workers. Well, parto is not part-time workers. The word parto came from part-time, but parto is a gendered language, meaning middle-aged women taking up part-time job. But sometimes they're working for full-time. But status, parto is a status. Middle-aged women have non-regular job. That's parto. And if you're young, that's arubaito. And even though parto and arubaito do exactly same type of job, meaning the language are different because that reflects your age, category, and also gender. So language are very much genderized. That really show this kind of gender norm in Japanese society. And I said that there is a huge expansion of non-regular workers, and this is not just because of legal changes. It is true that there is a lot of deregulation of labor market in Japan. But if you look at the international data, actually the degree of deregulation was not that much in Japan. The degree of regulation was modest by international standards, and the degree of deregulation was also modest in Japan. What happened in Japan is that change in moral economy, that's more important than legal changes. That means that even though legal standard has been maintained to some extent, but there's more and more illegal conducts spreading in societies. I call that change in moral economy. It's not about legal economy or political economy, but moral economy. You probably hear the word black companies. That means that those companies don't really respect any legal labor standards, and they probably don't pay overtime work, or they conduct lots of powerful harassment or sexual harassment and things like that. And that term is so common. That means that the morality in the Japanese society that we have to respect labor law is been very much weakened. And we see less and less managers, especially not big companies, but the small and medium companies managers don't have much morality to respect those labor standards. So this kind of change in moral economy make the dual labor market system worse for those who take up a non-regular job. And also, the corollary of the labor market, dualized labor market, is that men have to be utilized to maximum degree in the past, and also in currently as well. They have to take up long working hours because that's the way that they show their loyalty to the company. So if you look at the data, you can see that this is data that the workers. Percentage of workers working more than 50 hours per week. It says 28% of men work like that. But if you look at the women and men working over 60 hours a week, still a quarter of men in the 30s and 40s work over 60 hours a week. And if you work over 60 hours a week and you die, the Japanese government recognizes that the accident is an industry accident that you can get insurance. So working over 60 hours is very much dangerous for your health. But a quarter, 65% of men work that way, according to the statistics. And if you think that statistics doesn't capture the whole thing, you probably imagine that probably more than 25% of men are working that way. And so another data that shows that the phenomenon of working hours is that overwork death, karoshi, that became English now. And if you look at the data by age group, if you're a middle-aged man, if you work long hours, you die by heart attack. But if you're young, you commit suicide. That's the sort of the people's reaction to long working hours. So we see that increasingly a lot of young men and also including women, commit suicide because of the long working hours. The red bar is overwork suicide. So you can see that the younger generation, like the 20s and the 30s, commit suicide because of long hours work. And the blue bars are overwork deaths, like heart attacks. And that data is available, and newspaper, of course, report this kind of data. But the thing is that society doesn't respond to it. Japanese society doesn't care much about this kind of data. That data is very shocking to me. And whenever I present this data to, French society or German or some other foreign countries, people are like, very much surprised at data and ask me, so what's the reaction of Japanese society, or what's the action or policy by the government? I have to say, none. Society basically doesn't care, and the government doesn't do any serious measurement against this kind of, overwork suicide. So that's sort of a grim side of a Japanese society, I think. But anyway, so men were utilized to the extent that they might commit suicide. So we have to look at women. That's a reserved army for the Japanese economy. So that is why that the government is very much excited about women's empowerment, because there's no room for utilized men any longer in the Japanese society. So this is a new law, Women's Empowerment Law, which was just passed last year, and it will be activated as of April 1st. So now large companies employed more than 300 employees are obligated to investigate the degree of women's achievement. So there are 4 items that they have to investigate, and 21 option items that they have to research. And based on the research, they have to make an action plan by April 1st. So my university, Sophia University, also started to, do some survey about the women's the achievement in universities. I'm sure if you're working for large companies, your companies are collecting the data right now. But the purpose is that very much activation. So the human rights concerns are not much included, although the diet sort of modified the law, and then there is a slight wording of we have to care about workers' rights. So there is some sentences about human rights in the law, but the emphasis is very much activation. And also the government want to see more women in the manager positions, because we clearly see not many women in management position. This is the data. So if you look at the share of women at managers, that's only about 10%. It's much lower than European level, which is around 30%. In the United States, around 40%. The Philippines is exceptional, like over 50%. But 30%, 40%, that's a sort of international trend among affluent countries. But Japan, Korea is around 10%. So if you look at the wage gap between men and women, Japanese women basically are about 70% of men's wages. 70%. In the other countries, about 80 or over 8, close to 90. That's the range of international, the rich economy, like OECD countries, but Japan is still 70%. The reason is that we see such a few number of women at management, only 10%. So if you compare wages of men and women at the manager positions, we don't see much difference. We don't see gender gap at managers. The problem is there are only such a few women taking up the position. So that's why government tried to encourage companies to set the numerical target, like by certain time. We try to increase the share of women management position by certain percent or something like that. But this is the graph that I really like to show you. It's very shocking. Dr. Kazuo Yamaguchi, he's a very prominent professor of statistics, and he analyzed the data, and he found out that if you look at the red line, that's a college graduate man, and green line in the high school graduate man, and another orange line is a college graduate woman, and purple is a high school graduate woman. Yeah. And if you compare this orange line and green line, you can see that it's more likely that high school graduate men become managers than college graduate women. So education doesn't matter in Japan. Gender matters more than education. And usually if you're living in a modern society, education should matter. So that's our definition of modernity, right? Merit system. If you have a higher education, you're more likely to succeed in the society. But this doesn't hold true in Japan. We are still in a feudal society that sex matters more than education, which is quite shocking to me. So this is a data that Kazuo Yamaguchi sort of dig and find out and calculated. So you can clearly see that there is a huge gender discrimination in terms of promotion. And why is that? And in order to get promoted, you have to accept long working hours. That's one of the huge barriers. And first of all, you have to keep working in order to get promoted, because usually it's an internal promotion. So you have to stay in the same company, and you have to accept the company's order of long working hours. And you have to make a balance between work and life. You cannot do that. So that's the reason that women cannot get promoted. And of course, I'm sure there is a gender discrimination. Dr. Yamaguchi did another statistical analysis, and he controlled for working hours in education, and still he found that 60% of the case that women cannot get promoted. So that's sort of the part of the gender discrimination. So that is why we see such a low number of women at management positions. So we have to see how this law will be what sort of effect this law will have, and it doesn't have any kind of obligation. And even though companies have to investigate, some data, it needs to disclose only one item, only one item. So we have to see how much effect this law will have. But it's a good step, better than nothing. And women graduates can compare companies based on women's status in each company. So government try to encourage companies to investigate and disclose, and then visualize the different degrees of women's achievement in each company, and then investment companies and also women look at the company's degree of success and make their own decision. Okay, so how about family side? The childcare and the family support is another story. And the government really want more babies. They are so keen on that. So in order to do that, they look at French government's policy, and they think that, we have to create more cash allowance like French government does, and also we have to create daycare centers, but they don't want to create too many daycare centers. There are many reasons. The reason is that there is a division of labor between central government and local government in Japan. This is essentially a decision by local governments. Even though the national government want to give subsidy to local government to create more daycare centers, local government don't want to, because they have to find a much up funding to use government subsidy coming from the central government. And also, even though there is a huge need of daycare centers right now, the population and the mother's population is shrinking. So in 10 years, we don't need that much daycare centers. So local government think that, we have to basically pass this next 10 years. And afterward, we don't need that many daycare centers. But daycare centers become a liability in the future. So that's why they are very much reluctant to create daycare centers. Instead, they want to make a very small scale nurseries, maybe near the stations or one of the buildings, or they want to do that kind of stuff. But still, it's difficult to create such small scale nurseries. Because of this kind of division of labor, it's getting very slow to have decent daycare centers. But anyway, the government is very much keen, so they started to spend a lot of money for family. It used to be that Japan spent a huge amount of money for elderly people. Even though Japanese welfare state is very much small compared to European cases, the distribution of welfare spending goes basically exclusively to elderly people. But now Japanese government realized that they have to redistribute this money from elderly people to younger generation. Otherwise, Japan lose more populations. So if you look at the family spending per GDP, it used to be that Japan spent less than 0.8%. That's you can see how little they spend for family purposes. But after DPJ government came to power, DPJ government was very much, their central policy was children first. So they created they sort of doubled the child allowance. So we see the huge jump of family spending after DPJ government. And LDP government doesn't, it's not so, excited about spending money, but they didn't. But still, they really cut the family allowance. But still, there are many other subsidies going to the family. So now, if you look at the current number, Japan spent 1.3% of GDP for family expenditure, which is more than Canadian or American governments. And of course, France or Germany and the European standard is about 3%. So compared to European standards, Japan still spend much less. But compared to Japanese past, you can clearly see that trend of the rise of spending in this area. But even though we see that clearly the rise of spending, Japanese government doesn't want to spend that much. The solution is marketization. So if you marketize, you deregulate daycare centers and let private companies to open up daycare centers, government think that would be a good solution because that would be cheaper. But the parents' associations and also the labor unions and very much disagree with marketization ideas because surveillance is not that trusted in Japan. According to the data, almost every year, about 15 to 18 kids died in daycare centers. That's quite a number. And because of the because of the shortage of labor, because there are not enough the staff in daycare centers, so they let the children to sleep or put some blanket on top, and then the kids die. Or maybe they give a big dumplings like omochi or that babies can chew and then suffocate it and die. So we see that kind of incident. Of course, that is very shocking that 15 or 18 babies die every year. But still, again, Japanese society reaction is very much slow. And there are not much systematic surveillance on the quality of daycare centers. And clearly, the private owned daycare centers have more accidents than publicly owned daycare centers. So that is why parents and labor unions are very much skeptical about the marketization solution. So there's not much push toward marketization. So quality of care is very much sidelined, and also wages of care providers are very low. The government needs to increase the wages to get more staff members, but because the wages are very much controlled by the government and the wages are so low, so even though there are lots of people who are qualified, have the license to become the teacher or nurses in daycare centers, they don't want to work in daycare centers because of low wages. And poverty also increased, and if you look at the child poverty, that's about 60%. It's quite high. 1 out of 6 children are living under poverty in Japan. And the shocking data is that the single mother's poverty is high. And you might think that that's universal, but that's not true. In Japan, over 50% of single mothers are under poverty. The thing is that even though they're working, they can get out of poverty. So if you look at the red bars, that's single mothers working. But still over 50% of working single mothers are considered to be poor. That means that the jobs available for single mothers are very much, undecent, non-regular jobs that they pay only a minimum, a little bit more than over the minimum wage. So these problems have not been focused in Japan. Instead, what government does is that sort of cheering up family ideology. I call that statist family ideology. And this is, I don't know, cute, goofy mascot is created by ADP to sort of encourage matchmaking parties. They think that, their analysis that we don't have many babies, because young people don't have opportunity to have parties. So let's subsidize matchmaking parties. And this is serious. They are very much serious about that. So that they even created this mini mascot. And then Matchcon, that's a matchmaking party organized by local governments. So they are selling this idea. So what is that? What is this sort of statist family ideology? There is two components to it. First is that they think that those who uphold this ideology think that family may give services to the state, but it must not become a burden on the state or burden of the state. So that means that it's a shame to get money from the government. It's a shame to rely on social assistance. And it's a shame to have child allowance as well. So you basically you may have to give services to the states, but you should not become a burden of the states. That's one component of a statist family ideology. The other one is that the another aspect is that they think that it is legitimate for the state to control the family. So the family should be, and that's legitimate to be controlled by the government. That means that marriage needs to be legal. You see that most of marriage in Japan is legal, so state acknowledge your marriage. And also this is a mandatory to use the same family name. 95% of women give up their maiden name and switch to their husband's name. So you have to use the same family name. And also there is still discrimination against illegitimate children. So if babies are born out of legal marriage, the children become illegitimate. And there is there used to be discrimination against them that if you have if your father died or parents died, and the money you can get, the inheritance, it used to be that illegitimate children can get only half of legitimate children. So that became unconstitutional 2 years ago. But still, when you register at the city government, you have to choose that this is legitimate or illegitimate. So there is a social sanctions against so-called illegitimate children. And if you look at the LDP's constitutional draft, it clearly shows that kind of statist family ideology. And Article 24 is a really focal point. I skipped the preamble. In Article 24, current constitution stated that a marriage shall be based only on the mutual consent of both sexes, and it shall be maintained through mutual cooperation with the equal rights of husband and wife as a basis. And this is supposed to be that this constitution states the substantial equality between men and women. And only is very important. So that means that marriage shall be based only on the mutual consent of the couple. So you don't need to listen to your parents, basically. It's not more feudal system. That's the meaning of current constitution. But ADP proposed that maybe we need to get rid of this only. So that's they said. It's very subtle. But why do we have to get rid of only? So that sounds like we have to listen to your parents, right? And ADP proposed that maybe we should create another clause which says the family is a natural and a fundamental group unit of society. Family members must help with each other. It sounds nice, and when I read it to my students, everybody loved it. Oh yeah, family is very important. Why not? It's nice to have that statement in the constitution. But ADP said that they said that they created this clause based on human rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I look up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says similar thing. It says, man and woman have the right to marry. I don't know. The family is a natural and a fundamental group unit of society. It says that, but that's the only part that the ADP try to imitate, but they don't pay attention the part that family is entitled to protection by society and the state. They don't care that point. Instead, they say family members must help each other. So that means the state doesn't help you. So please help with each other. That's the meaning of this constitutional draft. And you know that there was a ruling by the Supreme Court about the separate family name in December. I was lucky that I was in a Supreme Court room. I was, you have to choose, there's a lottery, and I was in the room, and the ruling was that, shockingly, it says that the forced use of the same family name is not unconstitutional. That was a ruling. Of course, Japanese Diet can pass the law to allow separate family name, but the use of the same name is not unconstitutional. That was a ruling by the Supreme Court. And what was shocking to me was that the Supreme Court Justice used exactly the same term as ADP's constitutional draft. And he said that the family is a natural and a fundamental group unit of society. Therefore, it is rational that family members use the same name. I was so shocked to hear this ruling because the Supreme Court judge used exactly the same word of the ADP's constitutional draft. I can see that some sort of influence coming from ADP and also ADP supporters about this ruling. So, but at the same time, Prime Minister Abe and also government want to encourage women to stay in the labor market. And lots of working women complaining about the difficulty and practicalness of change their family names. There's a pressure coming from women. So the solution could be that the ADP government is very much like to legislate a new law to allow more women to use maiden name as a business name. So on family legislation, you have to use the same family name. But on social life, you can use your maiden name. That's the sort of solution that ADP is thinking, because the family reservation is something that they want to keep. But you have to make a compromise to give more benefit to working women. So, but at the same time, you have to also appeal to conservative group within ADP. So it's very likely that there's going to be a policy package of constitutional reform of Article 24 and a new law to allow women to use their maiden name. And the constitutional reform Article 24 is not so known among women because if you look at the sentence, it sounds nice. Japanese young generation is getting more, so likely their generation is very much like the idea of family. So they don't see any danger in it. So it's very possible that ADP wins this constitutional reform, and also ADP want to change constitution from beginning to the end, but they are sort of thinking what would be the easiest point. And of course, Article 9 is the most toughest, most difficult place to change. So they think that Article 24 would be a good target, would be a good start, because everybody like family, and we let you use your maiden name, but let's emphasize family values. So that's a possible political development that I'm worried about. Okay, so there are tons of evidence to show you this about family status, family ideology, but probably I don't have much time, so I just bring some current issues. Last year, the government passed the outline of countermeasures against the declining birth rate. This is the sort of policy outline that government now has to respect. And it clearly says that government wants to disseminate scientific knowledge about pregnancy and birth. That means that government think that the reason that the Japanese population is declining because Japanese young women don't know much about pregnancy. They don't have scientific knowledge. They don't know that eggs age. So they just delay and having nice life as a single, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, that's too late to have babies. So that's that's the reason that they think that that's the main reason that the Japanese population is declining. So they realize that scientific knowledge has to be distributed at the high school age. And 2 years ago, they sort of hinted the idea of distributing women's handbook targeted only women age 15 to mid-20s, and it teach you, enlighten you that X age, so you have to be hurried about marriage. But there's a huge criticism coming from women, and so government sort of took it back, and then decided to distribute sort of health handbook, and that will be distributed to both men and women. But still, the emphasis is that, about reproductive knowledge, scientific knowledge. And also, they encourage a 3-generation household. So that's a cheap way of sort of escape away from trilemma of the care economy, because if grandparents can take care of their grandchildren, which is good for their grandparents' health and mental health, and the grandchildren became older, grandchildren can take care of their parents. So that's the government tried to create a new subsidy to encourage this kind of 3-generation household. So that's because this last year government decided this outline of countermeasures against the decline birth rate, and also Abenomics also, which was determined last year. It clearly set the population 100 million. That's a sort of symbolic number. If you know the Japanese history, Ichioku, that's very 100 million. It's a sort of number of total mobilization during the war. But the government, it doesn't really hesitate to use such, memory-ridden word and use 100 million. We have to keep the 100 million population. In order to do that, they use the term hopeful birth rate 1.8. That means that they try to set the target of birth rate 1.8, but they cannot really say that, because that means that very much that's interference with the personal choice. So they are very much careful about their wording. They are saying that we don't want to interfere with your personal choice. But if you look at the survey and ask how many babies do you want to have, and the average is 1.8, that's why it's a hope. People wish to have 1.8 number of children, so we support. We want to realize your hope. So that's the wording of hopeful birth rate, or kibo shushoritsu. Of course, the feminists are very much, critical, they're skeptical about this kind of population policy. And when Mori Masako was a gender equality minister, she really resisted against setting a numerical target of population, also birth rate. So the government didn't pass this policy under her jurisdiction. So the government, the prime minister can choose under what jurisdiction the policy can be passed. So he didn't ask the gender equality minister to do that. Instead, he has another sort of advisory council who would talk about local economy. So local economy council decided this kind of number, because local economy is worried about the depopulation. So they are worried about population issues. So that's the sort of the way that government really passed and also set the target. And now government want to also pass the comprehensive women healthcare law, which doesn't care much about reproductive rights. It's all about reproductive health. So reproduction and health and pregnancy, that's very much a sort of the hot topic in current government. So, to wrap up my story, so what is a political dynamism against this sort of neoliberal motherhood? And first of all, I'm gonna emphasize that the society has been liquidified. But that's universal phenomena in contemporary world. Society is very much liquidified, so people want to have something to cling on. That's usually family. That's definitely the family in the Japanese case. And we don't know, there's a huge insecurity about the future of Japan, especially younger generations. And the Japanese characteristic is that on top of that liquidifying society, we clearly see the relative decline of Japan's status in international society or international order. So China is rising, and Korean economy also very much matching up with Japanese economy. So Japanese, especially men, feel relative deprivation of Japanese status, or status of Japanese economy and the status of Japanese men. So that's why that many people like the idea of family bonding discourse. And also, we see that rise of religious right, and even though LDP is still in power, their supporting base is quickly fading out. And they don't have much support base these days. So they have to rely on sort of ideological religious group to generate votes. And those religious right groups, they have lots of ideologies, but one of the core ideology is misogyny and discrimination or sexist ideology. They are very much supporting the same family name. So they are mobilized hundreds of people against the use of separate family names, for example. That's really the core of the ideological opinion that they advocate. So what's women? And what do Japanese women do? Of course, we can see the resistance coming from women's side. So I show you some of the pictures. And these days, you can see lots of women standing up and try to, voice their, opinions. Tons of things. And I'm part of the movement too. But same time, you can see that if you look at the recent sort of renewal of women's movement, most of women's organizations or women movements prefer to use, prefer to sort of rely on the role as mothers. So we see lots of Mama no Kai, mothers associations against the security laws. And we can see lots, we call the women who sort of all of a sudden raise their awareness, 311 moms, Santen Ichiichi Mama, because after the earthquake, they realized that they have to be aware about government policy, and they started to collect their information. They very much distrust the government these days. They think that they are the only one who can protect their children's lives and so on. So we see lots of mothers getting aware and getting more political and try to get mobilized. But these very much, question about the role of mothers. They participate in politics as mothers. And it's so much easy in Japanese society to voice your voices as mothers, but so difficult to voice as women. And when I talk to Mama no Kai and mothers organization, and if I talk about, the danger of Article 24, they were like, huh? they don't get it. They know the family is important to them, and they engage in politics as mothers. So they really protect their own life, their family's life, their children's lives, but they don't really concerned about the discourse of gender equality. And there's some small groups who do care about gender equality. Angry Women's Club that I also involved. This is Angry Women's Club, the Femme en Colère. So that's clearly said that we fed up with male-dominant politics. Ossan Seiji means that male-dominant politics. So there are small groups like that. And also another group that I'm also initiated is a JG83 campaign. 83 means that, JG means that Josei Gin, that stands for Josei Gin, JG. 83 means there's only 83 members in the Diet right now. So JG83 campaign means that we try to double the number of women in the Diet. So we try to double means the target is 166 women in the Diet. So that's JG campaign. And also there's a 24 no Kai, Article 24 club. We have lots of grassroots Article 9 club. Hundreds of Kyujo no Kai in Japan. And also there's a Kyuju Rokujo 96 club. So recently there is a 24 club, but still very, very minor. There is one in Sedaraya, and I also trying to create another one, but still only a few in the Japanese society. So you clearly see that even though there is some kind of revival or renewal of Japanese women's political engagement, still most of them engage as mothers, not as women. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for your very dynamic and impressive talk. I have many questions, but I'm not the only one, certainly. But I'm quite surprised, and always surprised by the gap between the political animals. I mean, the political old guys and people's everyday life and people's way of people's ideology, for example. And I really wonder how such political ideology can have an impact on how people are thinking about their own lives. Well, and but I would like to ask you a bit more about the religious ideology. You said that PLD, LDP has to find some ideology and to be founded on, for example, religious party. I guess you are thinking about the Comito, for example, and. Of course, in Europe, when you think about religious ideology and family, you can have an image of what it is, and for example, the Catholic way of thinking, and so on. But in Japan, I don't have a hint about what is a family ideology for example, Buddhism parties, or well, I can't feel the link between them. So if you can.
Yeah, I didn't expect much about religious right. Basically, they are Shintoist. Not Buddhist or not Catholic. Religious right, I mean here, is the Shintoism, and they create an organization called Shinto Seiji Renmei. That's a political organization, a political venue of their own activities. And also, there's another sort of venue called Nippon Kaigi, Japan Congress. That's has a huge, lots of connection with Shinto Seiji Renmei. So that's what I mean by religious right. And that started to be visible in late 1990s. And they reacted first, the spread of sex education at school. They are very much against sexual education because that gives a self-autonomy or self-decision of women. And in the early 90s, that was more liberal in the Japanese the more liberal movement of Japanese government, and the Ministry of Education started to expand the sexual education at schools. So there's a reaction to that. That's one group. And also in the mid-90s, there was an incident or coming out of the call for women's issue, and all the junior high school textbook very much wrote about call for women, and those righteous group, right group, are very much against that fact that the schools teach about sexual education and also call for women issue. They think that junior high school students should know about those things. That's too early for them. And then they created a new group called to create a new history book, and that was 97, and they start Atarashi Reksho Tsukuru Kai, that was 97. Those groups came out to very much reaction to those two incidents. That's I see. And then there's numerous groups out of that, and there sometimes fight among them. So I'm not going to say that this group is very much monolith, but still there is a sort of tendency of this religious right group, and misogyny is really one of the core ideological element of this group, because they very much reacted to the sexual self-determination of women. And to deny that, they want to talk about call for women. They think the call for women is basically prostitution based on their own judgment or own self-determination. They are not forced. That's a core message. And also, they don't accept the women's emperor, and they don't accept the separate family names. These are the sort of the core policy issues that they advocate, and still they are advocating for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have some questions, or may I go further? Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. It's on. Well, this topic is very interesting, and I can speak from my experience and my personal experience, because I have a friend who a single mother. And she decided to marry to this guy who didn't pay for his son's education, or what we call like yoikui, to raise children. And then she decided to divorce. But the only reason she decided to do that, I mean, to get married in the first place, was to because otherwise the child wouldn't have any father. And if he doesn't have, the son didn't have father, that would be, very difficult for him to attend school and so on. So this is very personal for me. And I recently, through my work, I witnessed many women, Japanese women, could not enter to job field and then ended up going to sexual trade or sexual businesses. And then this is highly, this is influenced by, I think, the dynamics of male business as well, male society as well, because nowadays young male can't be hired as a regular. I mean, like the seishain, the normal employee, and then they were just like contract workers, and therefore they can't get their own income. They can't get the stable income, therefore they can't get married. And if they can't get married, then women can't get married, and this so forth and so forth. So I think this topic of women and economy and welfare should be, include men as well, because we can't only talk about women when we're talking about. So I appreciate your work, but at the same time, I prefer this discussion to be heard and included, with men as well. So, sorry. That's my comment.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's a good comment. Thank you very much. Man is a very important part of the story, of course. Of course. So that's maybe I didn't emphasize that. The problem, there are lots of problems of women's empowerment law, but one of the problems is that they don't talk about men at all. Because in order to change working styles, the men's working style need to be changed, but the government just focus on women's work style or women's program. And the program construction is very much how women can adapt to, how women change. And they don't talk about men at all, assuming that men do not need to change. So that means that the standard of the Japanese society is still about men, and the men is the standard that women have to imitate, and it's impossible to do that if you have to have the family responsibility. And the men's image or manhood of Japan is based on the gendered division work. So if you're a man, you don't have any obligation of work responsibility. You have to assume the family responsibility. You are exempt. That's the Japanese standard of men or manhood, and the women are not. So, but the government doesn't want to address this issue. This is really a fundamental societal standard or societal norm that, if that changed, everything needs to be changed. So government doesn't want to change manhood, and that's why the law is only about women, the women's empowerment, and not addressing men's work life. And anyway, there's a clearly data that if men help household care work or child raising, it's more likely that women have second and third babies. So government knows the data. In order to boost the birth rate, government has to push Japanese men to go back to their house. They know that, but the company leaders, economic leaders don't want to accept the data, so they still rely on the men working for 24 hours as almost like soldiers. So it's very difficult to change managers' mindset. And that is why that it's so difficult for women to take up management positions, because you can't really have it all. You have to choose either career or family. And in order for women to have it all, first of all, what you have to do is reducing working hours. But this is a very the point to prove your loyalty to the company and to prove your manhood in the Japanese society. So that is why it's so difficult to change. And obviously the target should be on men, not women. Yeah, that's why we get the message, okay, when men are dying by overworking, so now it is time for women to die by shining, right?
Thank you for the talk. Is there really any hope? I guess it just seems like there's a lot of conflicting kind of interests going on with the religious right. It seems like they think sex is somewhat shameful to some extent, and so I can see how that would influence the population to not be interested in sex as much. So it just seems like there's this cultural aspect, and then at the same time the LDP is just saying, well, we'll just throw money at you guys, or tell companies to hire more women. But at the same time, like you said, that's not really the problem. The problem is having the men go home and work or work at home, help out at home. So is there any hope? I mean, it seems like there has to be some kind of cultural, political revolution for things to get better.
Well, I don't really appreciate or support the population policy, because that really step in personal choice. But that's something, including conservatives, most of Japanese elite feel really a sense of crisis. So they are very much serious about population. And so in order to boost the birth rate, they eventually have to understand that long working hours are a very stumbling block. So that's a logical solution. And you cannot let women die. That's another minus of population, right? So I think there is some rationality still left in the decision makers' way of thinking. And in order to seriously generate economic growth and birth rate, they really have to tackle on the issue of working hours. So that's a hope. And if government started to serious about working hours, and then that would, sort of gradually change the whole thing. And if you look at the younger generations, they are not, if you look at the younger men, they are quite different from older generations, and the manhood are slightly different. Now they are more likely to participate in household work, and they are likely to cook, and they think that they cannot be attractive if you can cook. So cooking is a quite big part of young generation's men's daily activities these days, and also like soushoku danshi or bento danshi, that's sort of the new terms describe those new type of manhood. But there is the older generation's bashing against this new type of manhood, more like a warm, sweet man who also willing to participate in household work. But younger generation want to do more, want to commit to care work, and they think that that's not just an obligation to care, but they think this is a right to care. But they think that caring and also raising, kids are very much enjoyment of life. So they see it that way. So that's a big change, I think. So there is a hope in cultural change among men, but there is a huge, they have to be a generational war, basically. And so when you talk to college students, they still, they think that you can see that there's a cultural shift might be occurring, but once they get a job, they sort of all of a sudden become like a company soldiers, and there's a huge social pressure. Even though you want to take a, family care leave or something like that, maybe your boss wouldn't let you do. So in that case, there are only few men who actually stand up and fight against that kind of corporate practice. So the change will be slow, but still there is some hope in cultural shift. And I think the declining population would be one big trigger to change the mind of conservatives. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Murata, and let me ask you first, why women, especially mothers, support those misogyny ideology? It's really wondering. And the second question is, I first knew about you when your book was presented on the Foreign Affairs a couple of years ago, and it seems that the translation wasn't published in Japanese. Maybe is it too provocative to publish your book in Japanese? Thank you.
Interesting question. Okay. First was that the misogyny. I think the young women very much internalize misogyny, actually, because misogyny or sexism is every day of your life. So if you are super aware of feminism, it's very natural that even young generation women sort of internalize misogyny. And if you are career-oriented super women, have a good career, it's more likely that they sort of uphold the misogyny without noticing that. So if you are not so, careerist, actually, they are more relaxed and they want to have more balanced life or work and life. And they might be, for that kind of women might be more, think like women, actually. But career-oriented women want to become men, and because that's the only standard of achievement in Japanese society. So those women don't really, they want to become, they think that they can pursue a career just like men. And then if they hit the wall, they end up actually, giving up their own careers. So as a teacher, teaching at universities, that's really a challenge for me to teach the fact that there is a misogyny in a society and there is a sexist discrimination in society, because my students never believe me. They think that Japanese society is so equal, and when I talk about equal opportunity law, they think that it's Japan's past was so bad, but I'm so lucky that I'm born now, and we are living in such an equal society, and there's so much bright future for me, and so it's difficult. I call this a detox. Detox is necessary, and let them realize that discrimination actually exists. But no matter how I explain, they don't get it. Like when they talk about sexual harassment, they think, I never hear any kind of sexual harassment issue from my senpai or from my, sister. So you must be kidding. You must be exaggerating. So that's the reaction. So I have to detox them. But it's really challenging for me to detox them and to tell it's numbers don't have much power. So I have lots of numbers. I have statistical data, but they don't believe. Okay, numbers are numbers, but I don't hear any story in my, friends or in my circle. So, they believe their own circles, wordings, but don't believe the, scientific or social science data and analysis. So this is really a challenge when I teach to graduate students. But so I have to try to not just bringing up the numbers, but more stories, the personal stories. But if I talk about personal stories, and then they think, this is a personal responsibility, 自己責任. That person made a mistake. That's that person's fault. I don't know that kind of mistakes, so I don't need to care. So, of course, that's always, you have to make, multiple ways of communicating with students. That's tough, but that's fun. Another question, it's just being lazy. I published my book in English, and then, I wanted to move on to different topics. So that's why I didn't have Japanese version. And one publisher asked me to to write or translate, but translation wouldn't work. So it's better that I write from scratch in Japanese. So, but I didn't have much time to do that, and I wanted to do some other stuff. And the book I have just published 2 months ago included sort of the essence of my English book. So, the title is Making Our Voices Heard the renewal of representative democracy in Japanese 私たちの声を議会へ代表制民主主義の再生 So it's about representative democracy which I wanted to talk about and the question is women do really represent women so that kind of question substantial representation of women that's what I wanted to do. So that's one section. It's about representation, what it means, and representative democracy is not working in Japan. So how to renew it? And part of the story is about welfare state is dysfunctional. And although many Japanese want to have more decent size of welfare states, but there is no party who want to realize it. So I talk about political party dynamics and also the effect of globalization and the rising gap of income and how to make in order to make representative democracy work, we need to have more decent competition among parties and also more participation of the society and also diversity of the people in the Congress. So part of it can be read in Japanese. Thank you.
I guess your point is that there is no party in the Japanese political world that can support women issues, and you have to have women like Gin for women, right? So is this a kind of dual assembly, or I don't know how to say, but dual political... no, not parity. I mean, you need women to fight for women. So it's strange to me.
Oh, you mean there are lots of women who internalize misogyny? That's what
I mean that the political world is very sexualized or genderized, and that's a bit strange because political representative can support women just because from his political point of view it's important to do
because, in Japan only 83 women in the diet, that means only about 10%. It's very, very low. And if you look at the local government, still 12%, still very low. So we see a rise of women in the diet in 1990s and 2000, especially 2000, thanks to Prime Minister Koizumi and also Ozawa. But those women chosen by such big politicians basically they are chosen by men. They are very much objectified as a policy tool or political campaign tool of largest party ADP and TPJ. So women voters cannot see that those women are really representative of women. But back in 1989, there was a Madonna boom led by Doi Takako. She was the head of the Socialist Party. So she was the one who was supporting actually women. So, but we don't see that kind of women supporting women since then. So even though we see a big rise of women in the diet in the 2000, there was women objectified and women picked up by men for men's political purpose. So that's why women voters are not very much excited about seeing the women in the diet. So that means that women organizations have to find women candidates and the women have to push those women to the diet. That's why I sort of initiated JG83 campaign. So this is a campaign to create a list of women candidates and try to present the political parties because, now political parties are under pressure that they have to recruit more women. But they are saying that we cannot find any candidates, the women are not interested in politics. That's always an excuse that the political parties make. So we try to make a list of women who are willing to take up the job and bring the list to the party and saying that, that excuse is not true. There are so many women. You are not doing effort to seriously recruit women. So that's sort of the purpose of the campaign.
I would like to come back. Thank you very much for your. I would like to come back on what you said about your work and the challenging work as a teacher because the students don't believe what you say about discrimination. Do you think that the mothers hide the truth about discrimination to their kids to protect them or something like that?
Most of students, my students' parents' generation are still, there are lots of housewives. And my students very much respect their parents. And they want to have the similar life like their mothers. And their mothers are housewives. So even though society said you have to work, they are sort of ambivalent about their future. Because my mom, I want to have like life like mom, and she seems happy. But at the same time, I graduate from elite school. Maybe I have to get a job, and so they are very much torn to message coming, sort of conflicting messages coming from their parents and also the society. And yeah, so that's what I see. And also now, in the 20 years ago, the women in universities are still minor. So they are more aware that they are sort of leading role. And also, that was 30 years ago that equal opportunity law has passed. So the more sort of, they thought that they have to grab new opportunities because that's their first generation after the opportunity law. But 30 years has passed, and they think that, equality has been achieved. So they don't need to do extra effort. And they cannot find any sort of role model in the 40s, that my generation. So after sort of post equal opportunity law generation, they look at those generations. They might have career, but they don't have kids. So that means that that's not so attractive to them. But if they look at the mom have, me, and she has a nice life. So that's, another reason that they cannot find a good role model among working women, but their mom can be a good role model for them. So, I don't see much conflict between mothers and daughters these days. And daughters really like their mothers, which is good. But they don't think that, they have to change or they have to create new lifestyle, or they are more likely to be, have a nice family. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's nearly time to go back to work. So I would like to thank you for this talk. I hope we can do well. You will find the video through our YouTube channel, and maybe we'll make a paper in French. I hope so. Thank you so much for today.